Section 3.2 is solving linear systems algebraically. So now we're not going to be graphing to solve these systems. We're going to be using some algebraic methods to solve them. You're going to learn substitution and elimination, which you've already learned in Algebra 1, so this should be kind of coming back to you as we do this. The first one is substitution. That's the first one we're going to do. And these are the general steps of how you do this. First, you solve one of the equations for a variable. So pick any equation, solve for a variable, doesn't matter which one. Then substitute that expression from step 1 that you solved into the other equation and solve for that variable. Then you're going to substitute it back in to find the other variable that you haven't solved for yet. And that might seem like a lot of steps, but maybe write them down so you can refer back to them. And we're going to do a specific example right here. Let's say this is the system that you're going to solve, and you're supposed to solve by using substitution. So your first step is to pick one of the equations and solve for a variable. Doesn't matter which equation, doesn't matter which variable. So there's many different ways you can solve this. The easiest way is if you choose the equation that has a variable with nothing in front of it. Like here, this x doesn't have a coefficient in front of it besides 1. There's a 1 there. That's going to be the easiest one to solve for. So I'm going to choose the second equation and I'm going to solve for x. So in order to do that, all I do is subtract 3y to the other side, and x equals 3 minus 3y. So now I take this expression and I'm going to substitute it in to the equation that I haven't solved for. And I'm going to plug it in for x because x equals this. This is x. So I'm going to plug this in for x. So I'm going to have 2, and instead of writing my x here, I'm going to plug this in for x. So I'm going to have 3 minus 3y. And then everything else is the same, plus 5y equals negative 5. Now I only have one variable. I just have a y, so I can solve for y. So I distribute my 2 through, and I have 6 minus 6y plus 5y. Add my like terms here. So I'll have 6 minus y equals negative 5. And continuing to solve for y, I'll have negative y equals negative 11. Divide by negative 1. And y equals 11. So now to find out what x is, I'm going to plug this y in right over here to find out what x is. So x equals 3 minus 3, and plug in 11 for y. So x equals 3 minus 33, which is negative 30. So my solution is x is negative 30 and y is 11. So that's my solution. If I wanted to check it, I could plug it back into the very original. So if I plugged it in up here, 11 for y, negative 30 for x, that gives me negative 60 plus 55, which is negative 5. So it works. So my answer is correct. The other method is elimination, and these are the general steps of how to do elimination. So if you want to write these down to reference back to, what you're going to do is multiply the equations to try and get the same coefficients that only differ by a sign so that they'll cancel out. So like a 5 and a negative 5. They're the same, they just differ by sign. Then you're going to add these equations together, so then your positive and negative number will cancel out. And then you're going to substitute that value back into the original equation to get the other variable that you haven't solved for yet. So I know that might not have made a whole lot of sense, but we're going to do an example right here. If we have 2x plus 5y equals negative 5 and x plus 3y equals 3, and we're supposed to solve the system using elimination. So somehow you want to get either your x's or y's, again, doesn't matter which one, it can be either one. They need to be the same number but different signs. I'm going to say the x's are going to probably be the easiest because a 5 and a 3, you're going to have to multiply both of them by something to get to like 15 or something like that. But x's is easy. if this is 2, to get this x to be a 2, I just have to multiply by 2. And they need to be opposite signs. You're trying to get same number, opposite sign. So I'm going to multiply this whole bottom thing by -2, because I can't just multiply the x by -2, because then it's not an equation anymore. I have to multiply the whole thing by -2. So my two new equations are going to be, this stays the same, 2x plus 5y equals -5. If I multiply everything by -2, I now have -2x. This 3, if I multiply by -2, is now a -6. And my 3 is now -6. So that's step 1. Second step is add the revised equations. So now my second step is I'm going to add these, because now -2 plus 2 cancels out. And if I add the rest, 5 minus 6 is -1. And -5 minus 6 is -11. Divide by -1, y equals 11. So then my last step is to plug in 11 into either one of these equations to solve for x. It has to be the original equation, not one of these that you've multiplied by. One of the originals, so either one of these. I'm going to plug it in the second one just because. It doesn't matter which one you plug it into. So I'm going to plug 11 in for y. And if I subtract 33, x equals -30. Now I don't know if you noticed or not, this is the same exact problem you just solved above. So you can see that it doesn't matter what method you use, substitution or elimination, you should get the same answer. Our solution again is -30, 11. So this is what I want you to do in your notes, but I'm going to start it for you. I want you to use both elimination and substitution on each one of these. But I'm going to get it started. On this one, I'm going to use elimination, and on this one, I'm going to use substitution. Your job is to do the other one I didn't do. So over here, I'm going to do elimination first. Elimination, again, is I multiply one of these to get the same coefficient but opposite sign. So I'm going to multiply this bottom one by -4. So my new equations, top one stays the same. My bottom, if I multiply everything by -4, is now this. And I'm going to add my two equations together, so my x's go away, and 3 minus 20 is -17. This is 34, divide by -17, and y equals a -2. So then to get my x, I need to plug into one of these equations over here. So I'm going to plug -2 in for y. And x equals 1. So now my solution is 1, -2. So your job for your notes is to use substitution. And you know if you did it right, because if you got that answer, you did it right. So over here, on this one, I'm going to do substitution. I want you to do elimination. So substitution, I pick one of these, solve for variable, doesn't matter which one. I'm going to start with the top one and solve for y, just because I want to. So I subtract 3x to the other side, divide everything by 3, y equals -x minus 5. So I'm going to plug this y into the other equation that I didn't solve for. So I have 5x minus 9. Instead of y, I'm going to write -x minus 5. Then I solve, so I need to distribute. So I get plus 9x, because negative times negative is a positive. Then add my like terms, so I get 14x, subtract the 45 to the other side. -42, divide by 14, and x equals -3. So now, last step, you have x. Plug it in up here to find out what y is. So I plug in -3. So this is negative x, so it's negative times -3 minus 5. So y is, that becomes positive, so 3 minus 5 is -2. So my solution is -3, -2. So when we want you to use elimination, and you'll know if you got the right answer if you get that answer.